For many young players, stepping is a huge problem, and one which needs to be worked on over a long period of time. My thoughts are that you really need to dedicate at least one training session teaching the players how you want them to land and pivot, and then reinforce this in every other training session by doing at least one activity where pivoting is your focus. There are a few skills that need to be taught to ensure that pivoting is done correctly. For pivoting, I coach an outside pivot 95% of the time. But even the players who are in control of their feet and can do an outside pivot with fluency and flair struggle to do it if the pass isn't passed out in front of them. So really, if we're talking about teaching an outside pivot, we're also talking about teaching passing ahead. An outside pivot is, if you run to the right, land on your right foot and pivot to your right. If you run to your left, land on your left and pivot to your left. The benefits of an outside pivot. It is a fluent movement, so less stress is placed on the player's knees and ankles. Players are looking straight down the court after they turn, and this is where they need to be looking first. Also, an outside pivot means players turn away from their defender, which makes it easier to pass and play on without the defender slowing them up. So first, let's show the players what an outside pivot is, and let them get the feel of it. Choose a player who is good at passing ahead to be the thrower to start with. Try not to be the thrower yourself, or you will get really good at passing ahead, but your players won't. Have a look at the activity. The first player runs out at a 45-degree angle, they do an outside pivot, and then pass on to the player standing out to the side of the line, the post. They then pass back to the thrower. The worker becomes the post, and the post moves to the end of the line. Change sides and change throwers, helping the players who are struggling to pass ahead. If a player has trouble passing ahead, it's usually because they don't pass it quick enough. They tend to wait until a receiver is where they want to catch the ball, and then they pass it. This is too late. Stepping forward in the direction you want to pass the ball is also useful, as is passing a shoulder pass. For some players, I find the activity side to side very useful, helping a young mind understand they don't have to pass directly to a player. Try it and see. Many young players start the activity passing out to the side of the body, but then each pass gets closer and closer to the receiver's chest. This is a great activity to teach about passing ahead. Keep encouraging them to stretch the receiver out to either side. Here's a number of activities to help passing ahead. Have 2 throwers and 2 balls, and the worker works side to side. The throwers need to watch the worker and pass the ball as soon as possible, and stretch them out. On the move, with 2 or 3 players. Focus the players on passing right out in front, making the receiver stretch out. I find pivoting activities can be quite monotonous, so I try to get players to sharpen it up and get them to speed up their passes and their turns. I get them to speed up their turns by turning their head quickly, or as I say, flick your ponytail around. Also, I find that if I set activities that make players turn 270 degrees, they obviously want to turn the other way, the 90 degrees. So ensure activities are appropriate. Here's some pivoting activities. Here's an easy one for beginners. Throwers work on passing ahead and straight away. while the runners work on their outside pivot and turning quickly. Again, throwers work on passing ahead and straight away, while the runner works on their outside pivot, turning quickly and being ready to pass. The attacker makes a lead anywhere to receive the pass, they pivot and pass on to the other thrower. Now they have to concentrate on getting free while also doing an outside pivot. This puts them under more pressure while still doing an outside pivot. Another way I've tried to liven up pivoting is to add shooting to it. You've probably seen this shooting game. Teams try to compete for the first to 3 goals, or more if they are better shooters. Players only have 1 try at a goal each time they get a turn. Make it 2 tries if they are very young. Now add pivoting to it. Have the players start on the sideline and run out to receive the ball. Do an outside pivot, then the next player moves out. The last player gets to shoot once. They then run back to the start and everybody moves down a bit, back on the sideline. If your players really understand an outside pivot and can do it most of the time, you could then play the game saying they have to start the line again if they don't do an outside pivot. Also try this one. Down the court, pivoting. Remember, pivoting is a skill that needs continual work during nearly every session. With young players, it's something that will quite often take a lot of time till they're in control of their bodies. Remember, even the older players need to practice fundamental skills like pivoting often. Particularly for them, practice it in a match situation. A key skill to help players to do an outside pivot is running fast, a pass out in front, a chest pass, or hopping when they land. A pass out in front to make the runner stretch will always help them do an outside pivot. What's important when teaching an outside pivot? The pass to be out in front, practice it in every training session, make the activities fun, and put it under pressure by adding defenders. Always try and make pivoting fun and sometimes competitive. Practice it in every training session and get the passes to really make the runners stretch out by passing it right out in front, and then put them under pressure by making the activities complicated and by adding defenders. If your players could perfect passing ahead and pivoting, I'm sure you'd find the ball would flow from one end of the court to the other much more fluently. But this will take a long period of time, so make sure you're patient and persistent, working on it in every training session.